Sage had exactly 30 seconds to find a way out of this nightmare. Lord Aldrich's hand was closing around her wrist, his fingers cold and possessive, his pale eyes gleaming with triumph. Around them, the harvest festival swirled in a blur of music and firelight and laughing couples. But none of them would help her. None of them would dare interfere with a lord claiming an unclaimed Omega. "I've waited 3 years for you to come of age," Aldrich murmured, pulling her closer. His breath smelled of wine and something rotten underneath. 3 years of watching you grow into such a lovely little thing. And now finally, you're mine. Sage's wolf snarled inside her chest, desperate to fight, but she forced it down. Aldrich was a high-ranking beta with powerful connections. If she attacked him, if she so much as scratched him, she'd be thrown into the dungeons for assaulting a noble. Her aunt and uncle would disown her. She would lose everything. But if she let him claim her, she would lose herself. His lips descended toward hers. In wolf society, a kiss was a claim. Once his mouth touched hers in front of witnesses, she would be bound to him by pack law. His property, his possession, his to do with as he pleased. 20 seconds. Sage's eyes darted frantically through the crowd. She needed someone, anyone, who could give her an alternative. Another claim would override his. That was the law. If someone else kissed her first, Aldrich would have no grounds to take her. 15 seconds. There. At the edge of the festival, half hidden in shadow, stood a tall figure in a dark hooded cloak. She couldn't see his face, couldn't smell his rank through the chaos of scents around her. He could be anyone, a traveler, a merchant, a criminal. She didn't care. 10 seconds. Sage wrenched her arm free of Aldrich's grip and ran. She heard him shout behind her, heard the confused murmurs of the crowd, but she didn't stop. She crashed into the hooded stranger with enough force to knock them both back a step, grabbed the front of his cloak, and pulled his mouth down to hers. The kiss was supposed to be quick, functional, just enough contact to constitute a claim under pack law. It wasn't. The moment their lips touched, something exploded in Sage's chest. Heat flooded through her veins, golden and electric, like lightning striking from the inside out. Her wolf howled, not in protest, but in recognition, in joy, in a bone-deep certainty that shook her to her core. Mate. This stranger was her mate. She jerked back, gasping, and finally saw his face. He was beautiful. Devastatingly, impossibly beautiful, with sharp cheekbones and a jaw that could cut glass. His hair was dark and tousled from the hood, falling across a forehead marked by a thin scar. But it was his eyes that stopped her heart. They were the color of molten gold, bright and burning and fixed on her with an intensity that made her knees weak. Those eyes widened as he stared at her. His hand came up to touch his lips, and she saw his chest heaving beneath his cloak. He had felt it too. "Well," a cold voice cut through the moment. Aldrich had caught up, his face twisted with fury. "What do we have here? Some vagrant putting his hands on my intended?" The stranger's golden eyes shifted from Sage to Aldrich, and something dangerous flickered in their depths. "Your intended?" His voice was low and smooth, with an edge of dark amusement. "I wasn't aware she was spoken for. She certainly didn't kiss me like she belonged to someone else." Aldrich's face went purple. "She was about to accept my claim when she ran?" The stranger's mouth curved into a smile that held no warmth. "Threw herself into the arms of another man? That sounds less like an intended and more like a woman who would rather kiss a stranger than let you touch her." Laughter rippled through the gathering crowd. Aldrich's hand dropped to the dagger at his belt. "You dare mock me? Do you have any idea who I am?" "Lord Aldrich of the Western Province." The stranger stepped forward, and despite being roughly the same height, he somehow seemed to tower over the lord. "Third son of a minor noble house, known for your gambling debts, your cruelty to servants, and your unfortunate habit of pursuing women who want nothing to do with you." The blood drained from Aldrich's face. "How do you—" The stranger reached up and pulled back his hood. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Then, one by one, people began to kneel. Sage watched in dawning horror as festival goers dropped to their knees around her, heads bowed, until she was the only one left standing. She knew that face. Everyone knew that face. It was stamped on every coin in the realm, painted in every public hall, whispered about in every tavern from here to the northern mountains. Alpha King Lucian Ashford, the Golden Wolf, ruler of the 5 provinces and the most powerful shifter alive. And she had just kissed him. "I believe," the king said, his golden eyes returning to her with an expression she couldn't read, "that you and I need to have a conversation." Sage did the only sensible thing she could think of. She turned and ran. She made it approximately 15 feet. One moment she was sprinting through the festival crowd, her heart pounding and her wolf howling in protest at leaving their mate behind. The next, a hand closed around her elbow and spun her around, and she found herself staring up into those impossible golden eyes. "That," the king said mildly, "was rude." "I'm sorry." The words tumbled out in a breathless rush. "I'm so sorry, Your Majesty. I didn't know who you were. I just needed someone, anyone, and you were there, and I panicked. And I know that's not an excuse, but please don't execute me. I'm too young to die." Something flickered across his face. It took her a moment to realize it was amusement. "Execute you?" He released her elbow but didn't step back, keeping her trapped between his body and a festival booth selling candied apples. "For kissing me? That seems extreme." "I assaulted the king. That's treason. Isn't that treason?" "I'm fairly certain I kissed you back." His head tilted, studying her like she was a puzzle he hadn't quite figured out. "Which would make it mutual assault at worst. Besides, if I executed everyone who wanted to kiss me, I'd have to depopulate half the kingdom." Sage blinked. "Did you just make a joke?" "I've been known to, on occasion." He glanced over his shoulder at the crowd still kneeling in the distance, at Aldrich's purple face and trembling fists. "Though I suspect Lord Aldrich doesn't find the situation particularly funny, you've made quite the enemy tonight." The reminder of why she had kissed a stranger in the first place sent ice through her veins. "He was going to claim me. He's been following me for years, waiting until I came of age. Tonight he finally cornered me, and I didn't have any other choice." The amusement drained from the king's expression. In its place came something harder, colder. He was forcing a claim on an unwilling Omega? "He's a lord. I'm nobody. Who would stop him?" "I would." The words came out like a growl, low and dangerous. "I will." He turned and strode back toward the crowd, and Sage found herself following without deciding to. The mate bond tugged at her chest, urging her to stay close to him, and she was too overwhelmed to fight it. Aldrich had risen from his knees by the time they reached him, though his face was still pale with shock. He attempted a bow that came out more like a nervous twitch. "Your Majesty, I had no idea you were attending the festival. If I had known—" "You would have what?" Lucian's voice cut through the night air like a blade. "Hidden your behavior? Waited until I left to force yourself on women who don't want you?" "I wasn't forcing anything." Aldrich's eyes darted to Sage, and she saw hatred burning in their depths. "She was unclaimed. It's my right." "It is no one's right to claim an unwilling mate." The king's power rolled through the crowd like a wave, pressing down on everyone present with the weight of his alpha authority. Aldrich stumbled, nearly falling to his knees again. "Pack law exists to protect bonds, not to enable predators." "Your Majesty, please. This is a misunderstanding." "The only thing I misunderstand is why you're still speaking." Lucian stepped closer to Aldrich, and though he didn't raise his voice, every word carried the promise of violence. "Here is what's going to happen. You will leave this festival. You will return to your father's estate, and you will never, ever approach this woman again. If I hear even a whisper of you threatening her, I will personally ensure that the Western Province needs a new third son. Am I clear?" Aldrich's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Finally, he managed a strangled, "Yes, Your Majesty." "Then go." Aldrich went. He practically fled, shoving through the crowd with none of the arrogance he'd displayed earlier. Sage watched him disappear into the darkness and felt something loosen in her chest for the first time in 3 years. Then the king turned back to her, and the tension returned tenfold. "Now," he said, his golden eyes unreadable. "About that conversation." Sage swallowed hard. "I really am sorry. I'll accept whatever punishment you think is appropriate. Community service. A fine. I don't have much money, but I could work it off." "I don't want your money." He moved closer, and she caught his scent for the first time. Cedar and something warm, like sunlight on autumn leaves. Her wolf practically purred. "I want to know your name." "My name?" "It seems only fair." That hint of amusement was back, tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You did kiss me rather thoroughly. I'd like to know who I'm dealing with." Heat flooded her cheeks. "Sage. My name is Sage." Sage. He said it slowly, like he was tasting it. "I'm Lucian, though I suppose you already knew that. Everyone knows who you are. And yet you kissed me anyway." He leaned closer, and her heart stuttered. "Either you're very brave or very desperate. I haven't decided which." "Desperate," she admitted. "Definitely desperate." He laughed, a real laugh, warm and surprised, and Sage felt something flutter dangerously in her chest. "Well then, Sage." His golden eyes gleamed in the firelight. "It seems I've accidentally claimed an Omega, and she's accidentally claimed a king. I think we have quite a bit to discuss." The discussion, as it turned out, took place in the private chambers of the local inn, the finest accommodations in the village, which the king had apparently rented for the night. Sage followed him through the back streets in a daze, her mind still reeling from everything that had happened. She had kissed the Alpha King. She had felt the mate bond snap into place, and now she was alone with him in a room with a very large bed, and absolutely no idea what came next. "Breathe," Lucian said, sounding amused. "You look like you're about to faint." "I'm not going to faint." She sucked in a breath anyway, just to prove she could. "I'm just processing. Take your time." He shrugged off his cloak and draped it over a chair, revealing a simple dark tunic that did nothing to hide the breadth of his shoulders. "Would you like some wine? I find alcohol helps with processing." "I shouldn't. I do stupid things when I drink." "Stupider than kissing strange men at festivals?" "That wasn't stupid. That was survival." He turned to look at her, and something in his expression softened. "You're right. I apologize. That was a poor joke." The apology surprised her. Kings didn't apologize. At least, not the kings from the stories she'd heard. They commanded and conquered and took what they wanted. They didn't offer wine to nervous Omegas or admit when their jokes fell flat. "Why were you at the festival?" she asked, sinking into a chair by the fireplace. "Alone, in disguise. Don't you have guards and advisors and, I don't know, royal things to attend to?" "Many royal things." He poured 2 cups of wine anyway, setting one on the table beside her before taking the chair opposite. "That's precisely why I escaped. Have you ever spent an entire month listening to nobles argue about grain tariffs and border disputes? It's enough to make anyone want to disappear into a crowd of commoners and eat candied apples in peace." Sage stared at him. "You snuck out of your own castle to eat candied apples? And watch the dancing, and listen to music that isn't some stuffy court quartet." He took a sip of wine, his golden eyes watching her over the rim. "Is that so hard to believe?" "Honestly? Yes. You're the Alpha King. You could have anything you want. Anything except anonymity." His voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before. Everywhere I go, people kneel. They perform for me, lie to me, tell me what they think I want to hear. No one has spoken to me honestly in years." He paused, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "Until tonight, when a terrified Omega crashed into me, kissed me senseless, and then accused me of treason for kissing her back." Heat flooded Sage's cheeks. "I didn't kiss you senseless." My knees went weak. I'd call that senseless. That was the mate bond. Was it? He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, suddenly serious. "I've never felt anything like that before. Have you?" She shook her head slowly. The mate bond was rare, truly rare, not just the compatibility that most wolves settled for. Finding a true mate was supposed to be a gift from the moon goddess herself. Sage had never expected to find hers at all, let alone by accident, and certainly not in the form of a king. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "With the claim, I mean. I used you to escape Aldrich, but I never meant to trap you into anything." Lucian was quiet for a moment, studying her with those unreadable golden eyes. "Pack law is clear. A claim made before witnesses is binding unless both parties agree to dissolve it. I could release you, if that's what you want. Pretend tonight never happened and let you go back to your life." The thought should have brought relief. Instead, Sage's wolf howled in protest, clawing at her chest with sudden ferocity. The idea of walking away from him, of never seeing those golden eyes again, felt like a physical wound. "And if I don't want that?" The words slipped out before she could stop them. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, or hope. "Then I would ask you to come to the palace, not as a prisoner or an obligation, but as a guest. Give us time to understand what this bond means, to know each other as more than a desperate Omega and a king in disguise." "You want to court me?" "I want to try." He set down his wine and looked at her with unexpected vulnerability. "I've spent my whole life being told who I should marry, which alliance would benefit the kingdom, which bloodline would strengthen my heirs. But I never wanted any of them. And then you crashed into me like a hurricane, and for the first time my wolf said yes." Sage's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it. This was insane. She was a nobody from a small village with no money and no connections, and an aunt and uncle who would happily be rid of her. Kings didn't court girls like her, but his eyes were sincere, and her wolf was singing, and maybe, just maybe, insane was exactly what she needed. "Okay," she said softly. "I'll come." His smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Then let's see where this hurricane takes us." The palace was everything Sage had imagined, and nothing like she expected. It was enormous, yes, all soaring towers and gleaming marble and gardens that seemed to stretch forever. Servants moved through the halls like ghosts, anticipating needs before they were spoken. Her chambers were larger than her aunt and uncle's entire cottage, with a bed so soft she sank into it like a cloud. But the people were cold. The nobles watched her with barely concealed contempt. She heard the whispers as she passed. Common, nobody. Upstart Omega who got lucky. The court ladies tittered behind their fans, mocking her plain dresses and village manners. Even some of the servants looked at her with suspicion, as if she might steal the silver the moment their backs were turned. "They'll warm up eventually," Lucian said one afternoon, finding her hiding in the palace library after a particularly brutal encounter with a duchess who had made pointed comments about certain people knowing their place. "Will they?" Sage pulled her knees up to her chest, curling into the window seat she had claimed as her refuge. "It's been 2 weeks. If anything, they're getting worse." Lucian settled onto the seat beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. He had a habit of doing that, finding excuses to be near her, to close the distance between them without quite crossing it. Every time he did, her wolf purred with contentment. "The court is a snake pit," he admitted. "They're threatened by you because they can't control you. You didn't come here seeking their favor. You came for me. I came because my wolf wouldn't let me say no. She glanced at him sideways. And because you asked nicely. I never ask nicely. I commanded, and you obeyed. You absolutely asked. There was vulnerability. You practically begged. His eyes crinkled with suppressed laughter. I would never beg. Your eyes got all soft and hopeful. It was very unkingly. Lies and slander. But he was smiling now, that real smile that transformed his face from handsome to devastating. I'll have you tried for treason. Again with the treason. You really need new threats. He laughed, and Sage felt something warm unfurl in her chest. This had become her favorite part of palace life, these stolen moments with Lucian, away from the court's prying eyes. He sought her out every day, sometimes for hours at a time. They walked in the gardens and argued about books. They played cards, which she was terrible at, and chess, which she was surprisingly good at. He told her stories about his childhood, the mischief he'd gotten into, the tutors he'd tormented, the way his mother used to sneak him sweets from the kitchen before she died. In return, she told him about her parents, about the fever that had taken them when she was 8, leaving her to the mercy of an aunt and uncle who saw her as a burden. About the years of scrubbing floors and mending clothes, of being invisible in her own home, about Aldrich, who had noticed her when no one else did, and whose attention had been a curse disguised as a blessing. I should have had him killed, Lucian said darkly when she finished. They were sitting in the garden now, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and rose. Exile was too merciful. Exile is enough. I never have to see him again. You shouldn't have had to see him in the first place. Someone should have protected you. Sage shrugged, a gesture that had become habit over the years. There was no one. That's not a complaint. It's just how it was. You learn to protect yourself when no one else will. Lucian was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. I know something about that. My father died when I was 12. My mother had already been gone for years. The advisors circled like vultures, each one trying to control the boy king, and I learned very quickly that trust was a luxury I couldn't afford. She looked at him, really looked, past the golden eyes and the easy charm. Beneath it all, she saw the same loneliness that lived in her own chest, the same walls built from necessity, the same hunger for connection that had gone unsatisfied for far too long. We're quite a pair, she said softly, the orphan king and the unwanted Omega. Perhaps that's why the bond chose us. He reached out and took her hand, interlacing their fingers. The contact sent sparks dancing up her arm. Two broken pieces that fit together. Sage's breath caught. Lucian, I know it's only been 2 weeks. His golden eyes held hers, open and vulnerable in a way she suspected he never allowed anyone else to see. But I feel like I've known you my whole life. Like my wolf was waiting for you, even when I didn't know what I was missing. She should say something careful, something measured and sensible about taking things slow. Instead, she leaned forward and kissed him. It was softer than their first kiss, gentler, more intentional. His hand came up to cup her face, and he kissed her back like she was something precious, something worth savoring. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing unsteadily. Well, Lucian murmured, his forehead pressed to hers. That was better than the first time. The first time I was panicking. And this time? She smiled against his lips. This time I meant it. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Sage's life. Lucian courted her properly, with all the ceremony and extravagance of a king pursuing his queen. He sent flowers to her chambers every morning, different varieties each day, with handwritten notes that ranged from romantic to ridiculous. He arranged private dinners in the palace's hidden corners, away from the court's prying eyes. He took her riding through the royal forests, showed her secret passages behind the walls, and taught her the constellations from the highest tower balcony. And every night he kissed her until she forgot her own name. "The court is losing their minds," he reported cheerfully one evening, leading her through a moonlit garden. "Lady Thornwood fainted when she heard I'd commissioned a portrait of you. Lord Ashby has drafted 17 letters of protest. I've been using them to light my fireplace." "You shouldn't antagonize them." But Sage was laughing, unable to help herself. "They already hate me. They hate everyone. It's their primary form of entertainment." He pulled her beneath a flowering archway and pressed her against the lattice, his hands settling on her waist. "Besides, I rather enjoy watching them squirm. They've spent years parading their daughters before me, convinced I would eventually choose one out of desperation or duty. The fact that I chose a village Omega who kissed me without permission is driving them beautifully insane." "I had permission. You kissed me back." "A technicality." His nose brushed against hers. "One I will never stop being grateful for." He kissed her again, slow and thorough, and Sage melted into him like she always did. The mate bond hummed between them, warm and golden and growing stronger every day. She could feel his emotions now, flickers of his joy when she laughed, his frustration during tedious council meetings, his hunger when he looked at her too long. He said he could feel her too. It should have been invasive. Instead, it felt like coming home. When they finally broke apart, Lucian's expression had turned serious. "There's something I need to tell you." Sage's stomach tightened. Those words never preceded anything good. "What is it?" "The council has been pressuring me to formalize our arrangement." He kept his hands on her waist, his thumbs tracing absent circles on her hips. "They want an official announcement. A betrothal, if not a wedding date." Oh. She wasn't sure what she had expected, but it wasn't that. "And what do you want?" "I want you." The words came out raw and immediate. "I want to wake up next to you every morning and argue with you about books and watch you beat me at chess for the rest of my life. I want to introduce you to the kingdom as my queen and dare anyone to question your worth." Tears pricked at her eyes. "Lucian, but I won't push you." He cupped her face, his golden eyes fierce with sincerity. "If you need more time, if you're not ready, I will make the council wait. I will make them wait forever if that's what you need. Because I don't want you to agree out of obligation or gratitude or because you think you owe me something. I want you to choose me because you want to. Only that." Sage stared at him, this impossible man who wore a crown but looked at her like she was the one with all the power. She thought about the girl she had been 2 months ago, desperate and cornered and willing to kiss a stranger just to escape. That girl could never have imagined this, could never have dreamed that the stranger would turn out to be her mate, her match, the person who made her feel like she finally belonged somewhere. "I love you," she said. The words surprised her as much as they seemed to surprise him. She hadn't planned to say them, hadn't even fully realized they were true until they left her mouth. But the moment they were out, she knew they were right. "I love you," she repeated, stronger now. "Not because of the bond or the palace or because you saved me from Aldrich. I love you because you make me laugh, because you see me, the real me, not the Omega, or the nobody, or the burden. Because when I'm with you, I don't feel like I have to pretend to be anyone else." Lucian's breath caught. For a long moment, he just stared at her, his golden eyes bright with emotion. "Say it again," he whispered. "I love you." "Again," she laughed, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I love you, you ridiculous man." He kissed her with a desperation that stole her breath, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around until she was dizzy with joy. When he set her down, his forehead pressed to hers, he was laughing too. "I love you too," he said. "I've loved you since you accused me of treason for kissing you back. Possibly before that. My wolf knew the moment you touched me." Then I suppose we should tell the council yes. His smile was radiant. Is that a yes to the betrothal? Sage pulled him down for another kiss, answering without words. It was definitely a yes. The announcement was scheduled for the autumn equinox ball. Sage spent the morning being fussed over by a small army of attendants who seemed determined to transform her into someone unrecognizable. They pinned her hair into elaborate curls, painted her face with subtle cosmetics, and laced her into a gown of deep gold silk that matched Lucian's eyes. When she finally looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. "You look like a queen," her attendant Petra said softly. Sage wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a warning. The ballroom was already packed when she arrived, filled with nobles in their finest attire and enough jewels to fund a small kingdom. Lucian met her at the entrance, devastatingly handsome in black and gold, and the look on his face when he saw her made every moment of preparation worth it. "You're beautiful," he murmured, taking her hand and pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "I'm going to have to fight off half the kingdom." "I thought you liked fighting. Not when I could be dancing with you instead." They danced. They laughed. They endured the congratulations of nobles who had mocked her just weeks before, their smiles now fixed and brittle as they realized which way the wind was blowing. Sage should have been happy, was happy beneath the nerves, but something felt wrong. A prickle at the back of her neck, a whisper of unease that wouldn't fade. She was getting a glass of wine when she felt it, a familiar, unwelcome presence sliding up beside her like oil on water. "You've done well for yourself," Lord Aldrich said quietly. "For a common Omega." Sage's blood turned to ice. She turned slowly, keeping her expression neutral even as her wolf snarled. Aldrich looked different than he had at the festival, thinner, paler, with a feverish gleam in his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and bitter obsession. "You're not supposed to be here. The king exiled you." "The king exiled me from his presence." Aldrich's smile was a knife's edge. "But I have friends at court, friends who share my concerns about an upstart Omega seducing their monarch." "I didn't seduce anyone." "No? Then what would you call it?" He leaned closer, and she smelled wine on his breath. "You threw yourself at a stranger, forced a claim on him before he could refuse, and now you're about to become queen, all because you couldn't accept your proper place." Sage's hands trembled, but she kept her voice steady. "My proper place is wherever I choose to be, and right now, I choose to be far away from you." She turned to leave. Aldrich's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. "I'm not finished." His grip was painfully tight. "You see, I've done some research, talked to some people. Your aunt and uncle, for instance. Lovely people. Very forthcoming when properly motivated." Cold dread pooled in her stomach. "What did you do?" "I found your parents' marriage contract." His eyes glittered with triumph. "Did you know your father owed a debt to my family? A significant one. And do you know how he promised to repay it? No. No, no, no. With you." Aldrich's smile widened. "Your hand in marriage, promised to my house before you were even born. A legal, binding contract that predates any claim you made on the king." Sage's vision swam. It couldn't be true. Her parents would never have sold her like property. But she could see the certainty in Aldrich's eyes, could see the yellowed document he was pulling from his coat, and her world was crumbling around her. "This doesn't prove anything," she managed. "It proves everything. The council has already been informed. They're examining the contract as we speak." He released her wrist and stepped back, straightening his coat. "By tomorrow, your claim on the king will be dissolved, and you'll finally be where you belong, at my side." He walked away, disappearing into the crowd of dancers. Sage stood frozen, her mind racing. She had to find Lucian, had to warn him, explain, make him understand that she'd had no idea. "Lady Sage, A stern-faced councilman appeared at her elbow. "The king has requested your presence in the council chamber, immediately." The walk to the council chamber felt like a march to execution. When she entered, Lucian was already there, surrounded by his advisors. His face was pale, his jaw tight, and in his hands he held a crumbling piece of parchment that she knew with sickening certainty was the marriage contract. "Is this true?" he asked quietly. "Were you promised to Aldrich's family?" "I didn't know." Tears burned in her eyes. "Lucian, I swear I didn't know. My parents never told me." "But it is a legal contract," one of the councilmen cut in, his voice cold. "Signed by her father, witnessed, binding. Any claim made after this contract is null and void." "The contract was made without her consent," Lucian growled. "She was an infant." "Consent was not required for arranged marriages at the time. The law is clear, Your Majesty." The councilman spread his hands. "If you formalize a betrothal to this woman, you'll be violating established contract law. Lord Aldrich's family could challenge the union. It would throw the succession into chaos." Sage watched Lucian's face, watched the war playing out behind his golden eyes. He was the king. He had to think of his kingdom, his people, the stability of his reign. She was just one Omega. One worthless, unwanted Omega who had been sold before she was even born. "Lucian," her voice cracked, "I understand if you—" "Don't." He held up a hand, silencing her. His expression was unreadable. "Just don't. I need to think." He walked out of the chamber without looking back. And Sage, alone among strangers who had never wanted her there, felt her heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. She didn't wait for the council to throw her out. By the time the clock struck midnight, Sage had changed out of her golden gown, packed her few belongings, and slipped out through the servants' entrance. She left no note. What was there to say? The contract was real, the law was clear, and Lucian had walked away without even looking at her. The mate bond screamed in protest as she put distance between them, a physical ache that radiated through her chest with every step. She ignored it. She had survived worse pain than this. She would survive this too. The road out of the capital was dark and empty. Sage walked until her feet blistered, then walked some more. She had no destination in mind. Anywhere was better than staying where she wasn't wanted. Perhaps she would find work in some distant village. Perhaps she would disappear into the wilderness and let her wolf take over. Perhaps she would simply walk until she couldn't walk anymore. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered now. Dawn found her collapsed beneath an ancient oak, too exhausted to take another step. She curled into the roots and let the tears come, great racking sobs that shook her entire body. She cried for the future she had lost, for the love that had slipped through her fingers, for the parents who had sold her before she could even speak. She cried until there was nothing left, until she was hollow and empty and numb. When she finally lifted her head, she wasn't alone. Aldrich stood at the edge of the road, flanked by 4 men in riding leathers. His smile was the same oily thing it had always been, but there was a new cruelty in his eyes, a sense of victory. "I knew you'd run," he said, dismounting from his horse. "You've always been predictable that way. Whenever things get hard, little Sage disappears." She scrambled to her feet, but her legs were weak, and her wolf was sluggish from exhaustion. "Stay away from me." "I'm afraid I can't do that." He pulled a folded document from his coat. The marriage contract, she realized with a lurch of nausea. "You see, now that your claim on the king has been dissolved, this contract is once again in effect, which means you belong to me." "I don't belong to anyone." "The law disagrees." He nodded to his men, and they began to circle her. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way, Sage. Come quietly, and I'll be merciful. Fight, and I'll make the rest of your life very unpleasant." Sage's wolf surged forward, desperate to shift, to fight, to flee. But 4 against 1 were terrible odds, and she was already so tired, so broken. Maybe this was what she deserved. Maybe this was always how her story was meant to end. One of the men grabbed her arm. She didn't resist. Miles away, in the palace he had never felt more trapped in, Lucian was tearing his study apart. Books flew from shelves, papers scattered across the floor. A priceless vase shattered against the wall. His wolf howled in his chest, clawing at his control, demanding he find his mate and bring her home. She was gone. Petra had discovered her empty chambers an hour ago, and the guards reported seeing a cloaked figure leaving through the servants' gate just before midnight. She had run, just like she had run from him at the festival, except this time she hadn't stopped. And it was his fault. He had walked out on her. In her moment of greatest need, when she was terrified and vulnerable and facing accusations she didn't deserve, he had walked away to think, as if there was anything to think about, as if any contract, any law, any kingdom was worth more than her. Your Majesty. His captain appeared in the doorway, carefully avoiding the debris. We've tracked her route. She took the eastern road toward the mountains. Then we ride east. There's more. The captain's expression darkened. Lord Aldrich left the capital 2 hours ago with 4 of his men. He was seen taking the same road. Lucian's blood turned to ice, then fire. Ready my horse, he snarled, already moving. And send word to every outpost between here and the mountains. If Aldrich touches her, if he so much as looks at her, I will burn his family's lands to ash and salt the earth where they stood. Yes, Your Majesty. Lucian ran. He had spent his whole life being careful, being measured, putting the kingdom first and his own heart last. But Sage had crashed into his life like a hurricane, and she had shown him what it meant to want something for himself, to love someone more than duty, more than legacy, more than the crown on his head. He wouldn't lose her, not to Aldrich, not to a contract, not to anything. He would find her, and he would fight for her, and if the whole kingdom burned in the process, so be it. Some things were worth burning for. Aldrich's men had taken her to a hunting lodge deep in the forest. Sage sat in a corner of the dusty main room, her wrists bound with rope, watching her captors drink and celebrate their victory. Aldrich himself had barely looked at her since they arrived. He was too busy composing letters to send to the capital, crowing about his prize and demanding the council recognize his claim. By tomorrow, you'll be my wife, he told her, finally deigning to notice her existence. I've sent for a priest. The ceremony will be quick and legal, and there won't be a thing your precious king can do about it. Sage said nothing. What was there to say? She had no weapons, no allies, no strength left to fight. The mate bond had gone quiet in her chest, a dull ache rather than the screaming agony of before. Perhaps that meant Lucian had accepted her departure. Perhaps he was relieved to be free of the chaos she had brought into his life. The thought hurt more than the ropes cutting into her wrists. Night fell. Aldrich's men grew louder and drunker, their laughter echoing off the wooden walls. Sage let her eyes drift closed, too exhausted to stay alert. Maybe if she slept, she would dream of golden eyes and stolen kisses. Maybe she could escape into memories, if nothing else. The first scream jolted her awake. Her eyes flew open to chaos. The front door had been ripped off its hinges, and standing in the doorway was a massive wolf with fur the color of burnished gold. Its eyes blazed with fury, and its jaws were red with blood. Lucian. He tore through Aldrich's men like they were made of paper. 2 went down before they could even draw their weapons. A third managed to shift, but Lucian was faster, stronger, more savage than anything Sage had ever seen. He moved like death incarnate, and his snarls shook the walls. Within moments, only Aldrich remained. The Lord scrambled backward, his face white with terror, his hands raised in surrender. Wait, Your Majesty, please. Lucian shifted. One moment he was a wolf. The next he was a man, naked and blood-spattered and more terrifying than any beast. He crossed the room in 3 strides and hauled Aldrich up by the throat. You took her. His voice was barely human, rough with the wolf still clawing at his control. "You put your hands on my mate. Give me one reason I shouldn't rip out your throat." "The contract," Aldrich wheezed. "It's legal. I have every right." "You have no rights." Lucian's grip tightened. "Not to her. Not to anything. The contract your family holds is void. It always was." Sage's heart stuttered. "What?" Lucian's golden eyes flicked to her, softening for just a moment before hardening again as they returned to Aldrich. "Your father's debt was to the Aldrich family, but it was paid 23 years ago, 3 months before you were born. I had my archivists search the records while I was supposedly thinking. Your parents repaid everything they owed. The marriage contract should have been dissolved then, but Aldrich's father hid the payment records and kept the contract as insurance." "That's a lie," Aldrich spat. "You can't prove—" "I have signed receipts, witness testimonies, a full accounting of every coin." Lucian's smile was cold. "Your family has been committing fraud for 2 decades. The contract is worthless, and you—" He slammed Aldrich against the wall. "Are guilty of kidnapping, assault, and attempted forced marriage of the king's betrothed." Aldrich's face went from white to gray. "I didn't— She's not—" "She is." Lucian released him, letting him crumple to the floor. "She was always mine. From the moment she kissed me at that festival, she was mine, and I was hers. The only thing that contract ever did was make me waste precious hours proving what I already knew." He turned away from Aldrich and crossed to Sage, dropping to his knees before her. His hands were gentle as he untied the ropes, so different from the violence he had unleashed moments before. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice cracking. "I'm so sorry. I should never have walked away. I should have told you immediately that I would fight for you, that no contract could change how I feel. Instead, I let you think." He stopped, swallowing hard. "I let you think I didn't choose you." Tears spilled down Sage's cheeks. "I thought you didn't want me anymore." "I will always want you." He cupped her face in his blood-stained hands, and she didn't care about the mess, didn't care about anything except the fierce love blazing in his golden eyes. "You are my mate, my hurricane, my home, and I will spend the rest of my life proving that to you, if you'll let me." She kissed him. It was messy and desperate and tasted of salt and copper, but it was perfect. It was everything. When they broke apart, they were both crying, and Lucian was laughing too, that surprised warm sound she loved so much. "Is that a yes?" he asked. "It's always been yes." She pressed her forehead to his. "It was yes the moment I kissed you." Behind them, Aldrich groaned and tried to crawl toward the door. Lucian didn't even look. "Captain," he called, "take this man into custody. He has a long list of crimes to answer for." Guards flooded the lodge. Lucian hadn't come alone, Sage realized. He had brought half an army for her, and as he lifted her into his arms and carried her out into the moonlight, she finally let herself believe that this was real, that she was wanted, that she was home. They returned to the capital 3 days later. Sage had wanted to slip back into the palace quietly, to avoid the stares and whispers that would inevitably follow. But Lucian had other plans. "You left through the servants' entrance like a thief in the night," he said, helping her into the royal carriage. "You're returning through the front gates like a queen." "I'm not a queen yet." "A technicality I intend to remedy immediately." The streets were lined with people when they arrived. Word had spread about Aldrich's crimes, about the fraudulent contract, about the king riding through the night to rescue his mate. By the time the carriage rolled through the palace gates, the crowd was cheering so loudly Sage could barely hear herself think. Lucian helped her down from the carriage and tucked her hand into the crook of his arm. "Ready?" "No." "Perfect. Neither am I." He led her not to the private chambers she expected, but to the great hall where the council was assembled. Every noble in the capital seemed to be present, along with servants, guards, and courtiers pressed against the walls. At the front of the room, the council members sat in their ornate chairs, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. Lord Ashby rose as they entered. "Your Majesty, if you intend to continue this farce of a betrothal, the council must formally object." "The council," Lucian said pleasantly, "can go to hell." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Lord Ashby's face went purple. "Your Majesty, I have spent my entire reign doing what the council advised. I have married alliances instead of hearts. I have put duty before happiness. I have been the perfect king, and it has made me miserable." Lucian's voice rang through the hall, steady and sure. "No more." He turned to face Sage, and her breath caught at the emotion in his golden eyes. "3 months ago, a desperate Omega kissed me at a harvest festival to escape a monster. I didn't know her name. I didn't know her story. All I knew was that when her lips touched mine, something inside me woke up, something that had been sleeping my entire life." He took her hands in his. "You crashed into my world like a hurricane, and you upended everything I thought I knew about duty and love and what it means to be king. You made me laugh. You challenged me. You saw me, not the crown, not the title, but me. And I fell in love with you so completely that I can't remember what my life felt like before." Tears blurred Sage's vision. Around them, the crowd had gone utterly silent. "I don't have a ring," Lucian continued, his voice rough. "I gave you one before and then I let you down. I walked away when I should have fought. So this time, I want to do it properly, not with jewelry or ceremony, but with a promise." He dropped to one knee. "I promise to never walk away again. I promise to fight for you, even when the odds are against us. I promise to choose you, not because the bond compels me, not because of duty or obligation, but because you are the best thing that has ever happened to me." His golden eyes blazed up at her. "Sage, will you marry me? Will you be my queen, my partner, my home? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that you were worth every hurricane?" She was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face. The great hall was holding its breath. Even Lord Ashby had gone silent, struck dumb by the raw sincerity of his king's proposal. "Yes," Sage whispered. Then louder. "Yes, you ridiculous, dramatic, wonderful man. Yes." Lucian surged to his feet and kissed her, lifting her off the ground and spinning her in a circle while the crowd erupted into cheers. When he set her down, they were both laughing, and Sage didn't care that her face was tear-stained or that hundreds of people were watching. All she cared about was the man in front of her, beaming like she had given him the world. "I still owe you a ring," he murmured against her lips. "I don't need a ring. You're getting one anyway, possibly several." "Ridiculous." "You love it." She did. She loved him, his drama and his stubbornness and his terrible jokes about treason. She loved the way he looked at her like she was the sun. She loved that he had brought an army to save her and then knelt before his entire kingdom to propose. "I love you," she said, because she would never get tired of saying it. "I love you too." He pressed his forehead to hers, his smile brighter than any crown. "My hurricane, my home, my queen." And for the first time in her life, Sage believed she truly was. 1 year later, the Harvest Festival returned. Sage stood at the edge of the same village square where everything had begun, watching the dancers spin and the children chase each other between the booths. The air smelled of candied apples and wood smoke, and lanterns swayed in the autumn breeze. It was almost exactly as she remembered it, except this time she wore a crown instead of a servant's dress, and the man beside her was very much not a stranger. "We should have the palace host this next year," Lucian said, stealing a bite of the honey cake she had been saving. "Bigger venue, better wine, fewer opportunities for desperate Omegas to assault me." Sage elbowed him in the ribs. "I did not assault you." You grabbed my cloak and kissed me without permission. That's assault. You kissed me back. That's consent. Retroactive consent doesn't count. Then I suppose you should have me arrested. She grinned up at him. Finally make good on all those treason threats. He laughed, the warm sound drawing smiles from the villagers around them. The people had embraced their queen with surprising enthusiasm once they learned her story. The Omega who had kissed a stranger to escape a monster, only to discover her mate in disguise. It was the stuff of fairy tales, and the kingdom loved fairy tales. Aldrich's family had not fared as well. The fraud investigation had uncovered decades of corruption, and the entire house had been stripped of its titles and lands. Aldrich himself was serving a very long sentence in a very unpleasant dungeon. Sage felt no guilt about that. Some people deserved exactly what they got. "What are you thinking about?" Lucian asked, wrapping an arm around her waist. "How different everything is." She leaned into his warmth. "A year ago I was nobody, invisible, counting down the days until Aldrich finally caught me. And now? Now I'm queen of the 5 provinces, married to the most dramatic man in the kingdom, and—" She paused, a smile tugging at her lips. "And carrying his heir." Lucian went very still. "What?" The healer confirmed it this morning. Sage turned in his arms, taking his hands and pressing them to her stomach. "We're going to have a baby, Lucian." For a long moment, he just stared at her, his golden eyes wide with shock. Then joy broke across his face like sunrise, so bright and overwhelming that it took her breath away. He lifted her off her feet and spun her around, laughing like a child, while the villagers around them erupted into cheers. "A baby," he breathed, setting her down and cradling her face in his hands. "Our baby. Sage." "I know." Tears of happiness slipped down her cheeks. "I know." He kissed her, soft and reverent, his thumbs brushing away her tears. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers, and she could feel his joy pulsing through the mate bond like a second heartbeat. "I'm going to spoil this child terribly," he warned. "And you. I'm going to spoil both of you until the council writes formal complaints." "You already spoil me." "Not nearly enough." His hand slid down to rest on her stomach, gentle and protective. "Thank you for crashing into my life, for kissing me without permission, for giving me everything I never knew I wanted." Sage smiled, remembering the desperate girl who had grabbed a stranger's cloak and changed her fate forever. "Thank you for kissing me back," she whispered. The music swelled around them. The lanterns glowed golden in the twilight. And the Alpha King danced with his Omega Queen in the village square where they had first met, surrounded by their people and the promise of the future they would build together. She had kissed a hooded stranger to avoid acclaim. She had found her mate, her love, her home, and she had never stopped being grateful for that one desperate, perfect, life-changing kiss.